this is when you're going to find out that the seller did not respond to you because they're ready to sell right now, but because they're wanting to grow their business. And so we find this quite often, that the business owner says, well, I do want to sell my business in the next 3 to 5 or 7, 10 years. But really what I want to do now is I want to grow it, because at the time when I get ready to sell it, I want it to be worth more than it is now. But I am up against my bandwidth of what I can do, because I need more capital. I need more resources. I need a team to help me do it. Today, we're going to be talking a surprise presentation on the build-up buy-in and the build-up buyout strategy. Over the last couple of weeks that we've seen a lot of opportunities in the build-up buy-in and using the build-up buy-in buyout strategy in order to move forward.
By the way, Chris, I thought a lot about why we're seeing so many of those. And I realized that it's a function probably of the demographics. In other words, the leading edge of the baby boomers right now are 67 years old. And a whole bunch of those folks that are 65, 66, and 67 that want to sell pretty much right now. But then you get down into, remember, the baby boom goes for 15 years. So if you back off 5 years from that, the bulk of the baby boomers are still not quite ready to sell yet. They will be over the next 5 to 7 years. And I think the reason the build-up buy-in is getting the response it is it hits the bulk of the baby boomers that are not right now realizing the difficulties they're having building up their business to the size that they can sell it for the amount they want to retire on, or the amount that they want as financial security. Since that's still the biggest bulge, the math makes sense. In other words, having the most people come from that group actually makes sense because of the demographic. Does that make sense to you?
It absolutely does make sense. And that's what we've seen. Just to remind everyone, our objective in Pivot is not necessarily to teach you everything you need to do to buy a business, but to get everything you need to buy a business done. So it's less training, more doing, and understand the principles that we use. We find that the business owner says, well, I do want to sell my business in the next 3 to 5 or 7, 10 years. But really what I want to do now is I want to grow it, because at the time when I get ready to sell it, I want it to be worth more than it is now. But I am up against my bandwidth of what I can do, because I need more capital. I need more resources. I need a team to help me do it. I've grown it as far as I can. So you'll find that a lot here. And this is where we're finding those younger people who, when they're responding to our marketing communication, they say, well, I really wasn't planning on selling my business, but I really need help growing my business. And so this is one of those times when you'll know that, okay, the build-up buy-in is a strategy I should start to pursue with this particular business owner. Primarily, we're going to be talking about 3.3, gathering information, and 3.4, the initial analysis of the build-up buy-in. And we're going to talk about how to recognize the build-up buy-in opportunity that you're going to see in the cosmic bonding scenario. In analyzing the business, you're going to find that the business owner is going to either, one, self-identify themselves as someone who wants to grow their business further before they sell out, or they could actually be a younger person who responds that they don't necessarily want to sell out for maybe another 10, 15, or 20 years, but they do want to grow. And so there's an opportunity here, particularly for people who are not already operating or who have limited operating experience in the industry that they're going into. If you have a higher experience and you've been in your industry 10 or 20 or 25 years, this build-up buy-in may not be right for you, but there's many different ways we can structure it, because you can do a reverse merger in or a reverse merger out of the company, meaning that you can do stock swap purchase of the company and buy their company if you're bigger than them, or vice versa. You can have them acquire your company if they're much bigger than you. So there's a lot of different ways we can structure it that is very beneficial for both parties. Why it's good for you as the buyer, why it's good for the seller. Then recognizing when a seller prefers this strategy, when this is the best strategy to use for the seller. We're also going to talk about some of the initial questions that you're going to want to ask, particularly when they self-identify themselves in the analyzation process of saying, I really wasn't thinking about selling, but I want to grow my business. The questions take on a little different aspect than what we've talked about in the 10 questions. Now, we're still going to do those 10 questions, but we have some additional questions that we want to do in the build-up buy-in process to put a structure together that's going to help them realize their dreams of growing the company, and then to help you realize your dreams of getting into the company and then eventually buying out and using that company to buy out many other companies in the industry. The next thing is we need to make a determination of what the strategic value proposition that we're going to essentially illustrate to the business owner, why it's so important that they do this to build it up, and why we're essentially the only persons out there doing what we do. There's very little competition for what we do. Eventually, maybe 2 or 3 or 5 years down the road, someone may catch on to what we're doing, and we may eventually have some competition. But right now, for the next 5 years, we're the guys who have the strategies. We have the resources that we put together to allows us to put a strategic value proposition together that when we illustrate it to the owner, it's very hard for them to say no. The next thing is determining the current value of the business. We do it a little different when it's a build-up buy-in, because in addition to, for us, knowing it for our purposes and for our finance and structure reasons, we also need to go over that with the seller so that they understand it as well, because we need to get an agreement with the seller. And then finally, structuring the deal to fulfill the desired results. And we're going to come up with a different strategic value proposition, which we may share some or all of that with the owner at this time. Obviously, once we actually have a deal and we've got a deal structured, signed off, and we start working, then we'll reveal the complete deals and move forward with our complete strategic value proposition. What are the benefits of using this strategy? One is the seller can actually get a higher selling price. The seller wants to sell the business, but can't get the price that he wants to sell in order to have the kind of retirement that he needs. The higher selling price and the build-up buy-in can provide a platform to make that happen. Less financing required by the buyer. And right now, that's us. We are the buyer. And so less capital that we need to bring into a deal. And of course, the less capital we need to bring into a deal, better return on investment we get, essentially, usually. That's the case. The seller remains longer with the company. This is something that Gordon always brings up. When you buy a company and you take over an acquisition and you have a contract with a seller that they're going to stay on for 3 to 6 months, well, guess what? In 3 to 6 months, the biggest and best asset that company has had through inception is walking out the door. And when that happens, that asset walks out the door, the owner, when that happens, that leaves you with everything there. What if we had a mechanism so that the biggest asset the company had, the owner, who's grown it from scratch up to 1 million, 1.5, 2.5 million, who has the relationships with the suppliers, who has the relationship with the employees, who has the relationship with the customers and clients? What if they stayed on board for 2 or 3 years, or maybe as many as 5 years? What if you're going into an industry that you don't have a whole lot of experience into, and the seller's there to train you up, not just for 3 months, just not for 6 months, but for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and it's there to grow throughout the process. One of the things that we found is the business owner is a technician. That means he's really good at doing what the company does, the service that it provides. He's not a business manager, doesn't necessarily understand business management, financial management, or organizational management. And this is where we can come in and where we can provide business, financial, and organizational management things and team building for the owner. And in addition to the resources, the capitals, and the other asset things that they need invested into the business that the business owner just doesn't know. And this is where we come in, because we have skills already within the PIP management team that can do that. But in addition to that, we also have the skills to negotiate and bring in any other additional resources that we need to take it even to the next level after the next level.
Yeah. And also, Chris, another point to make right around that is many times that seller is going to be the happiest person in the world to have somebody take over those management and organizational and finance responsibilities so that they can focus on the more technical side of the business, which is what they loved and what got them into the business in the first place. So those folks get to be really happy in what they're doing. They've shed a lot of the responsibilities in the tasks that they really don't enjoy, don't like doing, aren't the most productive at. And that's the perfect hole for you and our team to be filling. So it's just another reason why this model, this structure and strategy fills so many needs of the various parties.
Absolutely. There's a more stable management transition and also a more seamless management transition. So even with suppliers and clients and things like that, all they know is here's one of the new owners of the business. The old business owner is still there. So it makes it more seamless. So if there is an eventual buyout in 2 or 3 or 5 years, all your suppliers, all the clients, all the customers, all the employees, they've seen the growth in the business. They're more comfortable with you. It's a more stable and seamless transition and management takeover. There is better buy-in from the seller on the selling price. You get a better buy-in on the current value because the seller knows that even if he wants $2 million for the company right now, but you're the only person that's made an offer of $1 million, then the seller knows the company's not worth $2 million. And if he were to sell right now, he's got to sell for $1 million. And so he's willing to say, how do we get it to $3 million, which is our goal. We always want to try to double or triple it, over the next 3 to 5 years, so that when we take out that seller, we already own a good piece of the company. How do you recognize when the seller prefers a strategy or when you prefer the strategy? It's very important that you recognize the seller prefers the strategy, particularly in the initial communication. It's very easy when they respond from the initial communication, because almost in 100% of the cases that we've had thus far, the seller says, I wasn't thinking about selling my business, but when I saw your letter, I thought I'd consider it. But what I'd really like to do is grow it more before I sell out in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Or if they're younger, they're going to say, but what I really want to do is I really want to grow it to the next level, but I don't have the capital. I haven't been able to put together the investors. They're going to have some limitation. And guess what? They're going to tell you what the limitation is. That's good for you. If we know what they're lacking, we can figure out how to deliver it. This is very important. And then there's always a value there of delivering what they're lacking. When discussing the initial offer is another time. So that means you've come to the seller and you said, well, Mr. Seller, I'm offering you $1 million for your business. And the seller goes, geez, I was thinking more lines, $2 million for the business. And you could say, well, I can understand you. And in a lot of this is true. This is a true statement. We can actually look back at their financials and I can say, well, if you would have sold this business back in 2004, 2005, we probably could have justified that price. But right now, based on where the business is right now, we can't justify that price. So we have two options. We can either purchase it right now at the current market value, or there is another method where we can finalize the sale and say 1 or 3 or 5 years from now at a higher price. Which would you prefer? These are the two scenarios that you're going to know that the build-up buy-in is perfect. Let's talk about some of those initial questions that you're going to want to talk about when they respond to your letter and they really don't want to sell, they really want to grow. First of all, they have a growth plan or they don't. The business owner is already going to have a growth plan or they won't. For the most part, in the initial contact, if they say, I really wasn't thinking about selling my business, but when I saw your letter, I thought I'd consider it. Really what they really get into is they want you to invest in their business. And this is their shy way of saying that. And they're going to have a plan. They're going to say, well, I need this, I need that, I need to do that, and all this. Now, if you're presenting your LOI or in discussing price of the business, you've already done the analysis. We're already going to have a plan if they don't have one. But if they have the plan and it's in the initial contact and they will most likely have a plan, the first question is you're going to ask them, well, is how much money do you think it's going to take you from where you are to where you want to go? What's your plans for the money? What are you going to do with the money? What results do you think that's going to produce? How much more sales is that going to increase for the company? And more importantly, what about the profits? How much more profitable is that going to make it? And they may have the answer here. They may not. It could have been they're just trying to grow their business and they had no idea of how it's going to help. If I could provide this money and you could get those results, what's that worth to you? Do you have anything else planned beyond that? Then at this time, assuming that you don't know how you're going to structure all this, I think I've got the baseline of everything that I need here, John. Let me take this back to my team and let us construct a plan that can take us from where you are to where you want to be. Then we want to come back and we want to determine the strategic value proposition. We're going to build up a proposition that the owner can almost not resist. It's going to be so strategically positioned and there's going to be so much value in it that it's going to be so hard to resist. It's going to be the hardest thing for them not to do the deal. In fact, if they don't do the deal, they're going to be having nightmares because they didn't do it. What's the value that you can bring that beyond what's already there? The next thing is what is lacking in the current. Other things that we can hopefully identify and certainly can identify in usually the initial discussion is what other growth methods have been overlooked? Because almost every company has them. They've all been overlooked. They're within the company already. Here's something that everyone on this call and everyone as part of PIVA can bring to the table is you can bring a cash flow plan, a fast cash plan, a growth plan, an actual plan to get them from where they are to where they want to be. We also bring business, financial, and systems management into the company because usually entrepreneur's an entrepreneur, right? He's a technician. He's really good at what he does, not necessarily so good at running businesses, growing businesses, getting the capital that they need and putting the systems in the company so that the company runs more effectively so he can work on the business instead of work in the business. Is usually not the skills of the typical entrepreneur. In addition to that, your own skills, you as the deal driver, you bring to your skills and talents that you bring to the table. You may be good at marketing. You may be good at negotiating. You may have good contacts. You may have office skills a lot of different skills that each of you individually already have, regardless of whether or not you had partners of business acquisition with you, just the skills that you already have. And you have some skills or you wouldn't have been here in the first place. We can take them to the next level. And then in addition to that, obviously, skills and talents of others. Gordon, I'd ask you at this time to give us the definition of an entrepreneur. And in that, by doing that, you'll see that this is the real definition of an entrepreneur.
Yeah, and that's my favorite definition. An entrepreneur is a person who has a vision, who orchestrates the time, talent, and resources of other people to make their vision real. And it really, that's what you are. You're an orchestrator of people's time, talent, skills, and other resources, including capital, which we have an ability to generate that into the company. I want to make a quick comment here, Chris. I know everybody on this call, I have to believe everybody that's listening right now has seen the program Shark Tank. And you have these very wealthy investors that are sitting there and people who own businesses come in to get an investment in their company. You have to be amazed at how low they value the companies and how anxious the entrepreneurs are to get these people to put in this very relatively small amount of money for a very large piece of the company. And many times you'll see that half the motivation behind them doing this is not just to get the money, but to get that person involved because of the doors that person can open, because of the other resources that person could bring into the company, because of the business experience that person has in knowing how to grow, knowing how to infuse critical elements into a company. And just the idea that they can partner up with that person is a big magnet for them to do this at a very low price on their company for the little amount of money that's being put in. And once you understand that psychology of what's going on when that person or those people come into the room to sell their investing in their company to these investors, you start to see that same psychology applies when you're sitting in front of that business owner and you're playing, in effect, the role of the investor who's going to come into their company potentially with cash and all of the resources that can take them to exactly where they want to go. And if you play that role right, then you will, in effect, be positioning yourself so that these folks are going to be begging you literally to come in and wanting to do it at a very modest valuation in their company in relationship to the amount that they're willing to give you to give them what they want. And it all happens and plays out for exactly the same reason that the same psychology works on Shark Tank. So if you've never seen Shark Tank, watch a couple of episodes and you'll see that psychology at play and you'll understand what role you're playing and where you're coming from and why you're going to get the responses and reactions that you do.
I think I've told the story before, Gordon. I know I have a lot of times because it comes up a lot, but I've actually been paid money to take 100% of the company in order to save it for the business owner. If I didn't step in, take it over, the business owner was going to lose the company, lock, stock, and barrel, and was going to lose everything. And I did that back in, it might have been 2004, 2005. It took us a lot longer to turn it around and get it back into his hands than we originally anticipated. But there was no argument whenever he had been to attorneys, accountants, and everyone. He had talked to everyone figuring out how to do this. Well, the guy who introduced me to him was the next guy he went to after he talked to attorneys and trying to figure out how to make it happen. He come to him and said, how can I do this deal? He said, there's only one guy that can do the deal, and that's Chris Webb. And so I laid it out to him on the paper. I showed him how we were going to do it. There was no hesitation. There was no nothing. It's whatever it takes, let's go do it. And we were able to take over the company, get it turned around, and then turn it back to him and give it back. And I actually went through this whole downturn, and I've told the story about how we changed the business model and all that through the downturn on some of the previous webinars. I put zero money into it. In fact, I got paid to take it, pulled out probably $250,000 to $300,000 in that whole process. And so when you look at it that way, I probably ended up making a couple $1,000s an hour for my time over that whole period. And until we could get it structured and back into his hands. In the same, had I not stepped in, the company would have went away. And because no one else knew how to step in and do what I did. And I never had done that before. I figured the strategy out real quick and said, well, here's the only way it can be done. And we went and did it. The next thing we'll want to do is determine the current value of the business. We figured out what they want to do. And then we go back to them and say, well, John, before we decide to invest this money in your business to get you from where you are to where you want to go, we need to determine the current value of your business. In order for us to do this, we're going to have to go along with you. We're going to be investing in your business. So we're going to be getting a piece of the equity and a piece of the cash flow as we grow the business. Now, we're going to be here to help you throughout the whole process. Before we invest our time and resources into your business, we need to agree on the current value. We want to come to them with, this is the true current value that a bank or the IRS or investors are going to decide what your business is worth. And hopefully they're going to agree upon that. And if not, then we figure out how to come up with a business valuation model that is suitable for us and for them. Now, if we want to overvalue it now and undervalue it when they sell out, that's okay for us, but not vice versa if we decide to sell out. And so it's best to use the same formula going in as you do going out. That way we have apples to apples and oranges to oranges, and we're using the same formula so that the profits and the growth that we've brought into the company together are measured properly. Next thing is going to happen is we need to structure the deal to fulfill the desired result. Our end goal is to get to an initial strategy and structure so that we can make a letter of intent. And we start off by, talking to the seller and understanding the seller and determining their profile. We build the cosmic bond with them. This is usually when we find out that the build-up buy-in is really what they're after. We start gathering the information, just like we just talked about before. We start with where the company wants to go and how we're going to help them get there. And the reason we do that is we need him to buy into the vision of where we want to take the company. And he's already knows he wants to do it. He just hasn't found a way to get it. And through us, he's finding that way. So we need to buy into where the vision of the company is going. And again, we may actually have a better vision of where to take the company. Well, we'll find that out through the gathering of information and the initial analysis. So at this point, we've gone through the process. We then start identifying the opportunities and pitfalls within the business and within the industry and related industry and how we're going to make this business successful. We build that initial strategy and structure. And so then we get to the agreement process of, where what would regularly be the letter of intent to acquire the business. We now have a letter of intent to merge into the business, reverse merge into the business,